Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Ron Vecchia, and another special edition of Community Forum. It's me and the manager. The manager being the interim town manager, Terry Delehanty, who's also our police chief. So Terry, welcome to Community Forum again. We thought we'd get together like every month and try to get an update on what's going on in town. And we have a couple of agenda items we'll go through. The first thing I wanted to go through was the middle school. I know we're in the process right now of getting a company to come in to actually write the RFP.
Well, yeah, so we have an RFP committee that has been appointed by the council, and that committee is a voluntary committee, and certainly I've been appointed to serve on it myself. But we felt it was necessary before we start any work with that committee is to have an outside consulting with us that deals with commercial real estate with specific experience and sale of municipal land.
Okay.
And conversations leading up to that and why I determined that was necessary. You should know more about your property than the actual buyers, and that we weren't in that position. And we know a little about our property, but in conversations with commercial real estate people, they said, well, do you have a drilling done? Do you have a traffic study? Do you know if there's asbestos in it? Well, we all know by the age of the building there is asbestos in it. But we should know everything is with the soil samples and everything else before we put this out. So when bids come in, we know what people are talking about. We know exactly what is there and what we're selling. And to that point too, I think it's fair to say that we need to get really concrete on the bounds of that construction of that building. And
the question about whether it's on parkland or not.
Yeah, that's a heated question within town. From the information I have and the deeds that have been explored, it is not parkland. Its deed wasn't part of the Ingalls deed.
Right.
It's part of the two other family deeds that were deeded to the town of Winthrop.
Okay.
And certainly, the driveway in the backside, that's open for discussion. That, I believe, is part of that. But until it's surveyed, and until we have a title search done, we won't know exactly what contains that site and what doesn't contain that site. But I'm comfortable with what I've seen so far from the title searches and legal team's opinions that the auditorium, gymnasium, and the middle school are not part of the Ingalls site. And there's this, a debate going on with the rink and whether the rink should be included or excluded. I think the motions before council have it excluded. So we want to make sure that's understood when we do this RFP. We also, community input is going to be a very important part of the RFP process. And what's the neighbors want and like? And what do they desire as part of this RFP project proposal? So when we get everyone in the room, we'll know exactly what we want. And some of this will have to come from guidance from the council. What would the council like to see there? Because you can't put an RFP out without us knowing what we want for that particular site. Because then the RFPs will come back crazy. Building 200 apartments or whatever. We don't want that. We believe in incremental development. We need incremental development. Our tax base needs it, but we want to be smart about development. We don't want to overdevelop, and we don't want towers like we see down in my good neighbors' streets in Revere. Those are very large buildings, and now we saw in Florida, some of these older, larger buildings have some structural defects. If we're not on top of these things, that could happen here, and we don't want that. We want to prevent those things.
So during this whole process, it'll be open public meetings and stuff like that?
So yes, the RFP process, they'll be certainly open to the public. There'll be posted meetings and agenda items to be posted as well, and we'll specifically reach out during that process to the neighbors, to have that community input.
What do you want,
Yeah, and I know the, Peter Christopher, Councilor Christopher, has done some zoning work there and made it zoning so we know what zoning it has. It's very important to developers to know ahead of time what their zoning is so they can make their projections and make sure that they can make their profit margins. If they're not going to make the profit margins, they don't want to do the job. Right. So we'll save everyone a bunch of time and aggravation by having all this work done up front, which is very, very important to the developer, but very important to us as a community. Right. Because we saw that old CVS building down the center went from owner to owner to owner to finally development. So we're trying to save those steps, learn from that development, learn from the process that we had to go through there, and then reapply those lessons over at the middle school.
Okay, very good. The Civilian Police Academy, you mentioned that the other night at the council meeting.
Yes.
In your report. What is that basically, and how do the folks get involved in that?
Sure, so it's going to run on 10 consecutive, I shouldn't say consecutive, I think it's one Thursday night that won't run because of holidays, so Christmas holiday, and it'll pick it up in the first Thursday of January and conclude. So it's a great program for community outreach for the police department, but it's also great for the community to learn more about what we do, what type of calls we answer, how do we train. Certainly is a big part of it. What our community outreach process is in the police department. What events do we do every year? Why do we do those events? Police reform is new to this academy because police reform is a very robust topic still right now. And certainly we're moving through police reform. So I think the citizens should know where Winthrop was before police reform, where Winthrop Police Department is now after police reform. So we have developed a class just on that, and I'll teach that particular class on police reform. So we have one night we have a ride along. They actually do a ride along if you want with a police officer. We'll take the class to the range and show them. So we have a simulated range at this point. We're able to bring in a cot and actually have people live fire on threats and whether or not they should fire or shouldn't fire. Those are the types of trainings that we do, and now we're trying to implement those in the Citizens Police Academy, because we want people to understand these are difficult, tough decisions that we have to make in a split second. And if we hesitate, someone gets injured or killed. And we want to make sure that everyone understands what training we go through, try to make this as real and practical as possible so people get a real taste of what we go through as police officers.
All the inner workings of the police department.
Yeah, really, and discuss the stress of the job. And this last 2.5 months, I think we've had enough stress that most people don't see in a career. So we're grateful for all the work the police department does on a daily basis, and this is a way for us to educate the public, let them know that we certainly were a way above, and before police reform, we were doing most of police reform before police reform was even spoken of. And to that point, like Mass Chiefs have been asking since 2014 for the post commission to be developed, and I know it came after a major incident nationwide, but we were asking for it 5 years prior to that. So we've been out in the front of it in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has been way ahead of the game, in a large part because of the Mass Chiefs of Police Association and great leadership there in teaching new police chiefs when they come on that, hey, here's the standards of the industry, you comply with the standards of the industry, and don't go below those standards.
Very good, very good. Well, the last time we got together, I brought up the ferry at the last 90 seconds of the show, and I wasn't able to really get into the ferry. I know it's a very controversial thing in this town. I've always been a huge ferry supporter. We've had our lumps, we've taken our lumps with the ferry program because it's only been resurrected each year because we've been getting grants. But tied to those grants are kind of like ropes that keep you back. And the perfect example, and people should understand this, the people that are criticizing it, when we get the grants, we have to do something for the state, and that's to go to Quincy, and that's to go to someplace else, okay? if we didn't have to get the grants, in a perfect world, let's say we were able to get the MBTA to give us a one-time grant to let us run the ferry the way it's supposed to be run. Not going to Quincy, not going anywhere else, so that everybody knows, all of the commuters know, that when they go down to the ferry at 6 o'clock in the morning, they can take the ferry over. They can also take it at 6:40. They can take it at 7:10. They can take it back and forth. So what we've not been able to achieve is a consistent schedule that makes somebody in Winthrop that works in the downtown area that could take advantage of it, make them feel warm and fuzzy that, oh, I can take the ferry because the ferry's going to be running. I think that's been the biggest problem with the ferry, that we hadn't had an opportunity to get those consumers, instead of getting on the bus and going to Orient Heights, you get on the opposite bus and it takes you down to the ferry terminal. I mean, that seems to me the reason why it's really failed. And you know, as I said, I'm a strong supporter of it. Is there another way that we can do something that we don't have to go to Quincy or go to any other locale?
Well, that's a loaded question. We've spent $500,000 in taxpayers' money at the inception of the ferry, right?
Right.
And now we're trying to sustain the service without town of Winthrop, I should clarify that, town of Winthrop taxpayer money. Because all the grants that we get, that's taxpayer money too. But without the actual hurt and any revenue that the town of Winthrop raises through taxes and other, through our general fund, we're trying to run it without any interference with the general fund, because we've got a tight budget.
Right.
And we have a lot of departments, and you know, Steve Caller's down 6 people. So we have tough decisions to make in government.
Yep.
And certainly the ferry is a tough decision. You know, some you love it or you hate it. Right. And there's some people in between that like it, but they don't like it enough to take it. But they like to go on the nighttime ferry, or they like to go to an island, or they, you know, those fun things that, that you know, if I could just run the ferry based on the fun things, it could be self-sustaining.
Sure.
But that wasn't the original grant, as you probably remember. You probably were involved in the initial
all the money we got from the Seaport Bond Council, all that money, it was all tied to making it for consumers to go to work, to use it.
It was certainly a commuter ferry.
Correct.
And it was based on a commuter ferry model. You know, Winthrop is geographically challenged. We've heard Chief Flanagan say that for years about fire and getting mutual aid in.
Right.
You know, no one's coming to Winthrop to get on the ferry because we're at the end of the chain. So we've had trouble getting people from Revere to come over and use our ferry. So, you know,
I know there was some talk about trying to get with you know, the taxi company. He also has buses, small buses, and come up with services. I mean, look at all these new high-rises that are up on Revere Beach. Those people are getting in trains and going into Boston. If there was some type of a shuttle service from their location into the ferry terminal, I mean, it might work.
You're adding 20 minutes to your commute, right? Sure. You got to add 20 minutes to your commute, and then 20 minutes to your home commute. That's 40 minutes. It's an extra hour. Or do I just go down or across the street to Beachmont Station and get on the train? That's the problem. You know, East Boston just started running a ferry. You know, and I think Bay State Cruises is running that ferry. They're not, you know, it was the convention center ferry, but Bay State Cruises is running it. See what people are doing? They're not running it themselves. They're actually employing other agencies and companies.
You've tried to get them.
Well, we did, and Bay State was one of them.
Yeah, I remember when I was council president, we
both
went
went
together.
over. Yes.
And they just didn't.
There was enough money. There was enough volume for them. Our whole pitch then was, well, they could use the boat in between to get the Lovejoy station, Lovejoy, which they didn't have a boat to actually make it under the bridge.
Right.
We had something they needed, but the numbers still didn't work. So it's a numbers game. So the first year was 14,000. I think we did on that particular year. You know, other 14,000 tickets, and then you see about 3,300 tickets for the season. You know, you do that about the number of cruises that we're doing in a day. we're getting hit hard. It's not sustainable. And yeah, we make the trip to Quincy because at the time Quincy had those train stations closed, so that was part of the deal with MassDOT. Is we would pick up the Quincy run, and we got them, from 62,000 to 162,000 when I was up there in 2017. MassDOT has said to us this time, we're going to fund you, but you need a sustainable 3-year plan without MassDOT's help. I don't see how we're doing that in moving this forward in the future. Government should stick to what government does best.
Oh, I totally agree with you. They should not be in the transportation business.
It's a feeling proposition. Whether you look at the MBTA, who's billions of dollars in debt, or you look at our Wintertown and Winthrop Ferry service, which is not in debt, that we're able to balance it, but we're only able to balance it with subsidies. Those subsidies, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of power in our state government. With the speaker retiring, and we thank him for all his service and all the years that he took my phone calls and helped us financially, no matter what it was. And then you heard Senator Boncory just leaving state service as well. So Jeff Turco and the state representative and the senator did get us help with MassDOT and to help sustain this year. I don't know where we go after this year. I'm still in talks with several other agencies, trying to get them to realize that we can regionalize this, and Winthrop could be a consistent stop on an East Boston run. But I just don't know. So we have no secondary redundancy boat. When our boat goes down, we stop business. Who does business that way? Right? We can't. We need a second boat if we're going to stay in the transportation business. Another $1 million. That's crazy, and we just can't do it. We're going to try to do something, but I can't promise that we can sustain this ferry service. I'm not going to promise that because my commitment is first to public safety, and I include in public safety police, fire, and DPW. When you can't flush your toilet, who you call? When you have a water leak, who you call? That's public safety. And then our commitment to the schools is right there behind or equal to public safety. And general government, we don't have an assistant town manager. The structure of our town government is not set up to be redundant. So we have, if someone goes down, you have no one stepping up. You have to tap into the police chief for the town manager. You should never have to do that. We should be structured in a way where we have redundancy. The ferry should be structured in a way where we have redundancy. And it's just not happening at this particular point because we're always worrying about money, and we have to. We have a balanced budget that's required by law, and we have to make tough decisions. But I think we're sacrificed in the wrong areas at times.
Well, I hope something becomes of it. I mean, when you look down the road, you've got this development that's going to go on at Suffolk Downs, and that's going to be a huge strain on public transportation and automobile transportation. So,
10,000 units, to be correct.
So, all right, let's go to how about a COVID update?
Sure.
Things are not getting any better.
Well, they're not getting any worse.
Okay. Depends
Right?
on
We can look at it as a half glass, the glass is half empty or half full, right?
Okay.
I prefer to look at it as half full. So why? We see these numbers across the United States. The warmest states have the higher numbers. Why is that? Well, people are not outdoors. It's too hot. They're all going inside. So spread happens when people get in close contact indoors. We also opened up a large arenas and event venues, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm saying you should be smart when you do it, right? So I think it's very important for us to realize that COVID's here to stay, and we have to figure out a way to work with COVID, remain open, provide government services continuously with COVID, because we can't just close down every time we have a new variant. So I think that's what Meredith Hurley's team has been great in advising me. And certainly in the schools. She's one of our key people. So we've seen 89 cases over the last 14 days. and 7.4% positive test results. That's not bad. 65 of all of our residents are fully vaccinated. That's a very good number. 73 of the residents over the age of 12 are fully vaccinated. We're asking people again to limit socialization indoors. You know, I think we've gotten tired, and when we got tired, what do we do? We just forget about it. We're shaking hands again. We're hugging people. We're kissing them. And I think we're just too premature on those things. And I think until we get the variants situated and calmed down and we get a booster, I think a booster is very important to us to get. And I think it's going to help us significantly when we get it. But again, hand sanitize. Don't be hugging people. Stop shaking hands. Don't eat out of communal bins. You know, that's when buffets are back. And football season's here, Ron. We love football. And unfortunately, the Patriots lost yesterday. But you know, what do? We go back and we have people over and we enjoy our games. And we should do that. And I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying do it safely and smart.
All right. CBD, it's just moving right along.
Yes, I was down there this morning, so I try to visit there multiple times a week and do a walkthrough. We're actually coming up Bartlett Road today with new sidewalks, and the curb lining has been all the way up Bartlett now.
Looks good.
So it's looking good. It's looking good. They're going to have to come back in the spring. You know, we're not going to meet all of our deadlines because I added to the project. And I added areas where should have been included to begin with, but we didn't want to stretch the money.
So the budget itself was going good?
This budget was going really good. That allowed me some flexibility to add on Jefferson extension to some sewer lines up a little further up Jefferson. Also helps control an area that was very important to the success of puddling down there, and that's Putnam Place and Putnam Street. That wasn't part of the original scope of the project.
That's right.
So I added these two areas and authorized additional work, staying within budget. Not going over budget. But we saved some money on some other areas that we're able to reallocate to straighten those areas out. So I think it's, you know, I'm very happy. I never thought we'd be this far along in this project. I was up there 2017 working on the Center Business District project. So I'm really excited that we're going to have some, and we have a great new development down there.
So going through the numbers in 2017, that was my first year on the council president. I remember going up to your office. You were interim town manager at the time. And looking at the numbers and wondering how we were going to get there. And, you know, thank God the governor came through and Delehanty came through. And then with other changes that were made, we finally got the thing. I think we voted on it about 3 or 4 times because we had to make sure that we voted this correctly or the state wasn't going to recognize this.
And that's common. And that's pretty common. But, you know, you go through down there through a major storm, and there's no puddling.
I know.
There's no flooding.
That was wonderful.
There's no closing off Hagman Road like we've done in the past and Putnam Street and putting 15 horses out around the neighborhood to make sure that we close it every way. So I'm very happy with the progress we're making. You know, there's some things that were brought up at the last council meeting that has
What's the story with the left? I guess Councilor Terry was proposing a left turn at the end of that street so that people can make a left turn?
Well, so I guess, you know, and to give Councilor Terry full recognition and blame, or whatever you want to call it, he's been consistently about this left-hand turn throughout the project. He's been consistent about that left-hand turn, and not so much that he wants a left-hand turn. What he wants is to have the town to have the ability to send traffic left when we have events down there. So we did tree lighting and stuff like that. We would force traffic left to go up Bartlett. So we wouldn't have to close down the entire center. So why is that important? Well, you get Hong Kong Dragons, Nighttime Restaurant, La Siestas, two probably of pretty, if not the most busiest restaurants. Our point is not to hurt businesses, but to help them. So we always try to make sure cars can get by businesses and go, and you know, everyone's like, well, it's only a street away or a block away. That's enough for people to say, well, I'll just go to the other restaurant.
People are lazy.
And so we want to be as flexible as possible. So, there's several designs I asked Director Calla to explore with the landscape architects. Again, the council asked us to hire the landscape architects. So we have them still in retainer. We want them to come up with some designs, and maybe it's temporary stanchions that can be removed, so you can make that left-hand turn when we need it to, and then close it back off.
I see.
So you would basically, right now, it would come out way into the street, that island.
Yep.
Everyone calls it a bump out.
Yep.
People at home are going to say, what's a bump out?
Yeah,
it's basically a small island.
Exactly is.
So that small island would come all way over. In order for me to allow the police officer to allow left-hand turns, we're bringing cars head-on, and we don't want to do that. So what we do is leave this island up here,
Yep.
and then have a cutout in the island enough for a car to make that left-hand turn. And then we can close it off again and make it one full island again. So those designs will be either authorized or rejected by council. The only way to modify this project at this late hour is for a full vote of the council.
I see.
Because the council's the one that voted it
Right.
for the design.
Right.
So I can't modify it unless it's a safety measure. I can't modify it, and Director Calla can't.
So the French Square design itself is still the original design when I was on the council,
That's correct.
where the street in front of where Samuel's was is going to be an extension actually of French Square. There's going to be no road there.
There'll be no road there. What we commonly refer to Jefferson Street Extension,
Yep.
all the way down to Samuel's. That'll be eliminated only from the Hagman Road
Yep.
to Woodside. That's it. So the other extension over in front of Cafe Delight will still be flowing.
Right.
But that area would be a nice park area.
Yep.
And stuff like that. So that there's been no change, no suggested change, and no motion before the council on that park.
Okay. So when do you think by the end of the fall, we will actually see a French Square, the new French Square?
I think you probably will see that by the end of November. You'll start to see a new French Square. So right now we're worrying about the curbing and the
curbing,
sidewalks.
Yeah.
And
So
then
that would
after
be the next thing after the curbing,
Yeah.
after they get all the curbings in, then the new cutout of that.
So today we had people. We have two work groups. One was working on Hagman, the other one was working on Bartlett. So they brought additional crews in to start helping out to move things along a little bit quicker. But again, we added some work down by last rink as well, some drainage work down there, and also separating the middle school and the rink out to put the rink on its separate water and drainage systems. So that work won't be done until spring.
Okay, all right. We're just about under 2 minutes, so the only thing I was curious about, a lot of people have been asking, a lot of kids, a lot of parents, Halloween.
Yes.
What's going to happen, Halloween versus COVID
Yeah.
versus what?
So I wish I could say right here definitely what we're going to do, but stay tuned, stay posted. It's my desire to have a normal Halloween.
Yep.
But again, we have to look at our numbers, be responsible with them. We have to look and maintain in school and stay on top of those numbers. And so if we got to talk to our partners down the center as well. And we have to also look at the DPW schedule and make sure we have sidewalks in place, that there's no trip hazards. But we will have door-to-door trick-or-treating.
Yep.
Whether we have the big center event this year is still in question. And of course, I'll get advice from Meredith Hurley and also the Board of Health to make those decisions.
All right, Terry. Thank you again for coming down.
It's my pleasure.
You've been here watching Community Forum. My guest has been Terry Delehanty, who is the interim town manager, and of course, our police chief. Till next time, this is Ron Vecchia. You've been watching Community Forum.